download our Revise It Right revision app for hundreds of videos, quizzes, exam questions, tutor support and so much more. This video is about reactions of acids. Now there are lots of reactions with acids that we need to learn about and lots of equations to remember, so I'm going to take you through each of them now. The first one is reactions of acids with metal oxides. Now when an acid and a metal oxide react, they produce a salt and water. Okay, and it may be your job to know the name of the salt produced. Now the name of the salt depends on two things. It depends on the name of the metal and also the acid that's been added. So if there are three acids that we need to remember, so if it's hydrochloric acid, so if it reacts with an hydrochloric acid, it's going to make a metal chloride. If it's a sulfuric acid, it's going to make a metal sulfate. And if it's nitric acid, it's going to make a metal nitrate. So let's go through some examples now of what I mean by this. Okay, so we are reacting hydrochloric acid with copper oxide. And we need to know what is going to be produced. Well, we know because an acid and a metal oxide react to make a salt plus water, we know it's going to be a salt plus water. However, we need to be able to name the salt. So the first part of the name comes from the metal, and that is copper. So the first part of the name is going to be copper. And the second part comes from the acid. Now a hydrochloric acid makes a chloride. So it's going to be copper chloride. And then we know an acid and a metal also makes water. So it's going to be plus water. So hydrochloric acid plus copper oxide makes copper chloride plus water. Let's go through another example. So we're going to have sulfuric acid. This time sulfuric acid is going to react with copper oxide. Okay, and we know that that's going to produce a salt plus water because it's a metal oxide plus an acid. And again, we need to name the salt. So again, the name comes from the metal, so it's copper. And it's a sulfuric acid this time, which makes a sulfate. So it's actually a copper sulfate. And we know a metal oxide plus acid makes water as well, so it's going to be water. Let's do one more. This time we're going to react a nitric acid, but this time we're going to react it with aluminium oxide. So what salt does this make? Well, we get the first name from the metal, so aluminium. And then the second part from the acid, nitric acid makes a nitrate, so aluminium nitrate. And we know it's going to be water as well, because an acid plus metal oxide makes salt and water. So what we need to remember is acid plus metal oxide produces salt plus water. Remember to download our Revise It Right revision app, watch over 700 videos, answer 4,000 plus quiz questions, over 1,000 flashcards, 1,000 exam questions, worksheets, forums, and get help from qualified teachers and so much more. The link is in the description. Now when an acid reacts with a metal hydroxide, it also makes a salt and water. So again, it's acid plus metal hydroxide makes a salt plus water. But again, obviously we do need to be able to name this salt as well. So let's go through some worked examples. We've got an acid, which is going to be nitric acid. And we're going to add that to potassium hydroxide. And that is therefore going to make, well, we know the salt is going to be potassium nitrate because it comes from nitric acid and it's from potassium, so potassium nitrate, and we know that it also produces water, so water as well. Let's do one more example. Hydrochloric acid plus sodium hydroxide produces what? Well, we get the salt name from the metal, so sodium, and the acid, so chloride, because hydrochloric acid makes the chloride, plus water. and these are the two examples. So acid plus metal hydroxide makes salt plus water. Now we also need to know how reactions of acids mix with carbonates. So when an acid and a metal carbonate mix, it produces salt plus water and carbon dioxide. So acid plus metal carbonate produces a salt, again, which we have to name, plus water, but also plus carbon dioxide. So let's go through some worked examples. We've got nitric acid is going to react with sodium carbonate. What is that going to produce? Well, we know it's going to produce a salt. How do we name it? Well, we get the metal, so sodium, and it's a nitric acid, so it'll be a nitrate, plus water, plus carbon dioxide, because that is always produced when a acid mixed with a metal carbonate. Let's do one more example. Let's do sulfuric acid. So sulfuric acid is going to react with calcium carbonate. What is that going to produce? Well, it's going to produce a salt, and the name of that salt is the metal, so calcium, and sulfuric acid makes a sulfate, so calcium sulfate, plus always water is produced, plus always carbon dioxide is produced as well. So we need to remember an acid plus a metal carbonate makes salt plus water plus carbon dioxide. We also need to know how acids react with metals. So when an acid and a metal react, they produce a salt plus hydrogen. So it's acid plus metal produces a salt plus hydrogen. And again, we will need to be able to name the salt. So let's go through some worked examples. Okay, we're going to have sulfuric acid plus sodium produces what? Well, the salt is going to be sodium sulfate, plus we know that hydrogen is produced as well, so plus hydrogen. We'll go through one more example, nitric acid plus copper. So we know it produces a salt and hydrogen. The salt will be copper nitrate, taken from the metal and the acid, plus hydrogen. And there's one more reaction that we need to know, and that is the reaction of metals with water. But we've already kind of looked at this with alkali metals. So when a metal reacts with water, it produces metal hydroxide plus hydrogen. So we'll go through one example, because we've looked at this in the group 1's video, so if you want to go back to that video, if you don't understand them, please do. Sodium plus water produces what? Well, the metal hydroxide, so we take the metal name from the metal, so sodium hydroxide. And we know it produces hydrogen, so plus hydrogen. We'll do one more quickly. Potassium plus water produces what? We know it's a metal hydroxide and it's potassium, so it'll be potassium hydroxide, and again, plus hydrogen. So we need to remember that an acid and a metal will make a salt plus hydrogen, and a metal plus water makes a metal hydroxide plus hydrogen. So we went through lots of equations there, so now it's really important you have a go at practicing each of these to see what you can remember. So have a go at these questions here and we'll go through the answers together. So pause the video now. Okay, so what is produced when? Number 1, potassium oxide and hydrochloric acid mix. Well, we know when a metal oxide mixes with an acid, it produces a salt and water. Okay, so we're to name the salt, be potassium from the metal, and it's hydrochloric acid, so chloride, and we know it produces water as well. So that is potassium chloride and water. Sodium oxide and nitric acid. Again, when a metal oxide mixes with an acid, it makes a salt and water. So the name of the salt is sodium from the metal, nitrate from the acid, plus water. Sodium oxide and sulfuric acid. Again, a metal oxide makes a salt and water. So sodium from the metal and the acid is sulfuric acid, so sulfate plus water. Potassium carbonate and hydrochloric acid. Well, when an acid and a metal carbonate react, it makes a salt plus water plus carbon dioxide. So the salt is potassium chloride, so potassium, and it's a hydrochloric acid, so chloride, plus water plus carbon dioxide. So potassium chloride plus water plus carbon dioxide. Magnesium carbonate and the hydrochloric acid, where it's magnesium chloride plus water and carbon dioxide. So magnesium chloride plus water plus carbon dioxide. Sulfuric acid with potassium oxide. Well, again, when a metal oxide mixes with an acid, it makes a salt and water. So potassium sulfate plus water. And finally, hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide. An acid plus a metal hydroxide gives salt and water. So sodium chloride plus water. And they are your answers. So there's a lot to remember with this video, so please do continually go over these and try and test yourself on them. You can now move over to the quiz and also answer any exam questions on them. If you need any help, please do contact one of our tutors who will be happy to help.